London, January 1941. Behind blackout curtains, 30 miles north of the burning city, two men studied how to kill. Station 12. The room smelled of gun oil and old leather. Dr. Alistair Fairbairn stood at a table scattered with blades. 60 years old, spine straight as a bayonet, hands scarred from 2 decades policing Shanghai's blood alleys. 14 knife wounds, 7 bullet grazes. Across from him, Edmund Sykes, 55, Birmingham weapons engineer. Together they had designed the Fairbairn-Sykes fighting knife. 7 inches of steel, standard issue for every British commando. But tonight they worked on something smaller, something that weighed less than a pocket watch. Churchill's order had been clear. Give them a final option. Fairbairn picked up a sliver of metal, 2 inches long, narrow as a thumb, sharp enough to split a dropped hair. "It won't work," he said. "A blade this small, a man handcuffed in a locked room. You're asking me to design hope. I deal in reality." Sykes leaned closer. "Then design the illusion of hope. We send them into occupied territory with forged papers and tell them they're making a difference. Most will die. This just admits the truth. You're probably going to die, but you'll die fighting." Fairbairn said nothing. Outside, an owl called across frozen grounds. "The timings," Fairbairn said finally, "on the timetable of death, carotid artery, 5 seconds to unconsciousness. Those numbers are lies." "What?" "Medical fiction. A man doesn't lose consciousness in 5 seconds from a severed carotid. Not reliably. The real number, 8 seconds to a full minute, and in 8 seconds, a trained soldier can empty a pistol." "Then why publish it?" Fairbairn turned to the window. Beyond the glass, Britain's darkness stretched to occupied Europe. "Because a man facing torture in a Gestapo basement doesn't need accurate data. He needs to believe he has one last card to play, even if the deck is stacked." Sykes nodded. "Then we build it, and we tell them it works." They worked through the night. By dawn, they had specifications: blade length, 2 inches, weight, 40 grams, double-edged, needlepoint, black finish, no traditional handle, just a narrow grip wrapped in cord. The genius came in the sheath. Sykes designed it himself. Thin metal, 8 small holes punched around its perimeter. Holes that would accept thread. That would allow the entire assembly to be sewn directly into clothing, into a jacket lapel, a shirt collar, a coat lining. The blade would become part of the garment itself. "Production?" Fairbairn asked. "Sheffield, 2 weeks for the first batch, 47 units. Make them sharp." Fairbairn took the prototype and drew it across his forearm. Blood welled in a thin line. "That's sharp." The seamstress arrived 3 days later. Constance Wilmot, 48 years old, widow, 2 sons serving in North Africa. Before the war, she'd worked Savile Row, could identify fabric origin by touch, could reproduce any continental stitching pattern from memory. Fairbairn showed her the blade, explained what he needed. Constance held the weapon to the light. "You want me to sew a man's last chance into his collar? Make it invisible?" "Yes." "How many are you expecting to come back?" Fairbairn said nothing. She nodded. "I'll make it work. But understand something, Doctor. Every time I sew one of these, I'll be praying the man wearing it never has to reach for it, because if he does, it means everything else has already failed, and he's probably going to die anyway." Testing began in February. Pig carcasses, cold rooms, instructors drilling the technique until it became instinct. Reach, draw, strike. Most trainees needed 40 repetitions before they could do it without thinking. By March, Station 12 had 47 knives. 23 tested sharp enough to penetrate to lethal depth. Then they waited for the right students. The first candidate arrived in late March, a young American OSS volunteer. His name was Thaddeus Blackwell, 29 years old, tall, lean, dark hair graying at the temples despite his youth. Fairbairn studied the file. American-born, parents emigrated from England in 1910, father killed at Passchendaele 1917, mother remarried a German immigrant, decent man, clockmaker. Died of influenza 1925. Thaddeus grew up speaking English and German. MIT engineering degree, perfect for infiltration work, but the file also contained a note from his OSS training officer. Exemplary performance except close combat. Hesitates with blade work. "Mr. Blackwell," Fairbairn said, "tell me about your stepfather." Thaddeus shifted. "He was a good man, kind, taught me German. He left in 1923 because he saw what was coming, said good men had to stand against it." Your training officer says you hesitate with knives. Why?" A long silence. Rain pattered against windows. "When I was 15, Thaddeus said finally, I worked in a machine shop. Summer job. A lathe malfunctioned. Threw metal through an operator's neck. Severed his carotid. He was standing 3 feet from me. And I watched him die. Took 90 seconds, not 5, not 12, 90. He was conscious for most of it, trying to hold the wound closed, looking at me. "We couldn't do anything. That's why you hesitate." "Yes." Fairbairn closed the file. "The human body contains 5 liters of blood. Loss of 40% induces shock. Death by exsanguination is slow and ugly. The movies lie. The manuals lie." "I know. But you volunteered anyway. Why?" "Because slow death in an accident is still better than what the Gestapo does. At least it was quick by comparison. What they do in those basements is deliberate, refined into a science. I'm going to teach you to kill with a knife, Mr. Blackwell, not because you'll enjoy it, but because the day may come when the alternative is worse. And when that day comes, I need you to be ready." "I understand. This isn't about bravery, it's about survival. The knife I'm going to give you isn't a hero's weapon, it's insurance, the thing you carry, hoping you'll never need it." Thaddeus met his eyes. "Then teach me." Training began at Camp X in Ontario, Canada, joint SOE-OSS facility. Thaddeus proved exceptional at most skills: radio operation, demolitions, cipher work, map reading. His engineering background served him well, but put a knife in his hand and something changed. His movements became wooden, hesitant. Fairbairn arrived at Camp X in mid-April, brought 3 production knives sewn into continental-style jackets, German cut, French fabric, Belgian thread. He found Thaddeus alone in the practice room, 2 in the morning, draw, thrust, reset, over and over. Smooth, technically perfect, lifeless. "How many times have you done that tonight?" 243. "Put it down," Thaddeus obeyed. "That man in the factory, Patrick Murphy, did he have family?" "Wife, 3 kids. The youngest was 6. "And you've carried that for 14 years?" "Yes." Fairbairn picked up the training knife. "I'm going to tell you something they don't teach in manuals. The hardest part of killing isn't the physical act, it's the moral weight. The knowledge that somewhere, someone will mourn." He pulled out one of the production blades, the real thing. "This weapon was designed for one scenario. You're captured, restrained, facing torture and death. You have one chance. And that target is a human being, probably young, probably following orders, probably has a family. Killing him won't make you a hero. It will just give you a chance. A slim, desperate, probably futile chance. I don't know if I can." "Then I'll recommend desk work. Important work. No shame in it." Thaddeus was quiet. Then, barely above a whisper, "My stepfather said the difference between a good man and a great man isn't what you're willing to fight for, it's what you're willing to sacrifice. Good men sacrifice their safety. Great men sacrifice their innocence." He looked up. I can carry one more ghost. Fairbairn held out the blade. Then carry this. They trained 3 more weeks. This time, Fairbairn taught compartmentalization, separate action from consequence, focus on mechanics, breathe, visualize success without visualizing aftermath. By late May, Thaddeus could execute draw and strike in under 2 seconds. Smooth, committed. On the 200th repetition, he did it without that fractional pause. "That's enough," Fairbairn said. "You're ready." "How can you tell?" "Because you stopped thinking about Patrick Murphy. You were present, focused. That's all I need." "When do I deploy?" "June. France. Resistance network needs technical expertise. Bridge demolitions, railway sabotage." Thaddeus touched his lapel, where Constance had sewn the sheath invisible. "And this? You carry it. You protect it. You hope to God you never need it." "And if I do?" Fairbairn was silent. Then, 5 seconds of chaos can change everything. Not enough to guarantee escape, but enough to give you a chance. Sometimes that's all we get. June 3rd, 1941, RAF, Tempsford. Thaddeus stood on the tarmac with 11 other agents, all bound for different fates. Constance Wilmot came for final inspections. She reached Thaddeus last, examined his collar, his lapels, nodded satisfaction. "It's well sewn. They won't find it unless they rip the jacket apart, thread by thread." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." She looked up at him. "This blade won't save you, won't protect you, won't make you invincible. All it will do is give you one last choice when everything else is gone, whether that's worth dying for. That's between you and your God." "I understand. My sons are in North Africa. Every night I pray they come home. Every night I prepare for the news they won't. So I know what your mother must feel. My mother is dead. Then I'll pray for you in her place. I'll pray you never have to reach for this blade. I'll pray you complete your mission and come home safe." She stepped back. "But if the worst happens, if they catch you, if they chain you in some dark room, remember you have one more card to play. Remember someone back home cared enough to give you a fighting chance." The bombers took off at midnight. Thaddeus watched England disappear beneath clouds. Somewhere down there, Fairbairn was training the next class. Constance was sewing more blades into more jackets, sending more young men into night with invisible weapons and impossible odds. The weight against his chest felt like nothing, the smallest weapon Britain had ever made. But as they crossed the channel, as anti-aircraft fire bloomed below, Thaddeus understood something Fairbairn had never quite said. The knife wasn't really a weapon, it was a promise that even in the worst moment when everything had failed and death was certain, he would still have agency, still have choice, still have power to decide how his story ended. That promise weighed far more than 40 grams. The parachute opened. Night air rushed past. Below, occupied France waited in darkness. Thaddeus touched his lapel one last time, then let go and focused on the landing zone approaching fast. Whatever came next, he was ready, or at least, he had trained himself to believe he was. Sometimes, belief was all you got. France. June 1943. Nearly 2 years after Thaddeus Blackwell first touched French soil, 23 months of borrowed names, of waking to wonder if today the knock would come, of living in the space between heartbeats where survival meant perfect performance every minute of every day. He had landed outside Chartres that first night, met Auguste. The farmer with 3 dead sons and hatred that burned cold and steady. Auguste brought him to the network. Bakers, teachers, shopkeepers who had decided submission was worse than death. They called him Michel Moreau, the engineer from Lyon. For the first year, he taught them demolition. how to drop bridges with minimal charges, how to derail trains without destroying track. Small victories that bled the German war machine one cut at a time. By spring 1943, the network had grown to 23 active members, 17 successful operations, 4 ammunition dumps destroyed, 32 occupiers dead. The Gestapo wanted them badly, offered rewards, executed hostages, but the network held. The jacket never left Thaddeus's body. Constance Wilmot's stitching kept the blade hidden against his chest. He carried it sleeping, working, running through darkened streets, prayed he would never need it, until someone decided 20,000 Reichsmarks was worth more than freedom. June 10th, 1943. Thaddeus sat in a café on Rue de Rivoli, waiting for Auguste. The meeting was routine, monthly coordination, nothing special. Then he saw Renaud Mercier, the wine merchant, the man who could get anything. Documents, supplies, information. Everyone liked Renaud, charming, connected, useful. Renaud was leaving a building across the street with an SD officer, both smiling. The German clapped Renaud on the shoulder, friendly, familiar, the way men act when they've done business together before. Thaddeus felt his blood go cold. There could be explanations, an undercover operation, a coincidence, a contact being played. Thaddeus wanted to believe any of them, but deep down, he knew. The way you know when something fundamental is broken. When the ground beneath you isn't solid anymore. He didn't confront Renaud, didn't warn the network, not yet, not without proof, but he marked the moment, filed it away, started watching. 2 days later, the raids came. June 12th, 2:30 in the morning, Thaddeus crouched behind the railway junction. Charges placed, timers set, 12 minutes to withdrawal. Gunfire erupted from the safe house. 2 blocks away, dogs barked, shutters slammed. The sounds of a trap closing. Thaddeus ran toward it. Stupid, emotional, everything training said never to do. But Auguste was there, Auguste who had become like family. He rounded the corner, saw the trucks, the soldiers, the bodies in the street. Auguste face down on cobblestones, not moving. Blood pooling black under streetlights. An SD officer turned, young, surprised. Both men froze for a heartbeat. Then the officer reached for his pistol. Thaddeus was faster. One suppressed shot from the well rod. The officer dropped, but others had seen, heard. Boots pounded pavement. Thaddeus ran, almost reached the river, almost made the backup route. The bullet caught his shoulder, spun him, dropped him gasping while rifles surrounded him. They zip-tied his wrists. Professional violence followed, controlled, designed to hurt without damaging valuable goods. Then the truck. The drive across Paris as dawn broke, past streets he'd learned in darkness, past monuments that would outlast all of them. The truck stopped at 84 Avenue Foch. Elegant Haussmann architecture, wrought iron balconies. Before the war, wealthy families. Now, the Sicherheitsdienst, the men who extracted secrets. 3rd floor, windowless room, chair bolted to the floor, drain in the center, tools on a metal table that looked medical, clinical. The Germans had refined interrogation into science, but before experiments came inventory, before questions came searches. The first search was thorough. 2 soldiers, methodical. They emptied his pockets, found the forged papers, maps, compass disguised as a button, the well-rod's spare magazine, lockpicks in his belt, escape map in his boot heel. They removed his shoes, cut the laces, checked the hollow heels, took his belt, his watch, his jacket went onto a table for later examination. The blade stayed hidden. Constance Wilmot's stitching held. 3 hours later they searched again. New team, fresh eyes. This time they cut the jacket's lining, examined the padding, checked collar construction, lapels, cuffs. One soldier held the jacket to the light, ran fingers along the seams. Thaddeus forced his breathing steady. The man's fingers passed within an inch of the blade. Moved on, they found the cyanide pill, the L pill sewn into the collar. Standard SOE issue, the suicide option. The soldier held it up triumphantly. Within minutes, an officer arrived, examined it, smiled. Clever. But we always find them. You understand what this means? No escape now. Only the long road. Only our questions and your answers. Thaddeus said nothing. The third search came at midnight, 16 hours after capture. 3 searches this time. Assumptions that he was SOE. Valuable, therefore carrying more than standard equipment. They heated the jacket, checked for invisible ink, examined it under magnification, tested the fabric, took apart the buttons one by one, spent 40 minutes while Thaddeus watched and prayed. They found nothing. The jacket went back on the table. The blade remained invisible. When they left, Thaddeus allowed himself to breathe. 3 teams of experts, and they had missed it every time. Constance Wilmot was an artist. Heinrich Vogel entered at dawn. 42, career SD officer, doctorate in psychology from Heidelberg. The Reich didn't put stupid men in charge of interrogation. He sat across from Thaddeus, studied him. You killed Lieutenant Fischer last night, 23 years old, engaged, wedding planned for September. Silence. I know you're American. OSS most likely. Your German is too good for British SOE. You learned it from a native speaker. Family, probably. Vogel leaned forward. You're valuable, which means you know things. Names, safe houses, radio codes, and I'm going to learn all of them. Name, rank, serial number. Geneva Convention applies to soldiers in uniform. Not to spies in civilian clothes. You have no protection here, no rights, no hope of rescue. You are effectively no one. The interrogation began. 6 months. Not continuous torture. That would have killed him. The Germans were smarter. 3 days of questioning, beatings, sleep deprivation, standing with hands cuffed overhead, water forced into lungs until he drowned and vomited and drowned again. Electric shocks, then 3 days of rest, medical attention, food, sleep. Let hope creep back. Let the prisoner think maybe it was over, then start again. Vogel rotated techniques, sometimes gentle, conversational, offering cigarettes. Speaking of philosophy and art, sometimes bringing photos, dead resistance fighters, executed civilians, bodies in ditches. Thaddeus held. Gave nothing beyond name, rank, serial number, even when they broke his fingers, even when infection set in and fever raged and he couldn't remember his real name anymore, only Michel. Michel Moreau. The engineer who didn't exist. The jacket stayed in his cell. The Germans let him keep it. Blood-stained from the night of capture. His blood. Auguste's blood. 2 years of resistance soaked into wool. And hidden in the lapel, the blade. Still there. Still waiting. Thaddeus could feel it when he lay on concrete trying to sleep. The thing Fairbairn had given him with the promise of choice. But what good was a weapon when they kept you handcuffed 23 hours a day? When guards watched constantly, when reaching for your collar would bring immediate violence, the blade stayed hidden, useless, a promise that couldn't be kept. December came, 6 months since capture. Thaddeus had lost 40 pounds, could barely walk. Infections had damaged his left hand permanently. Fever came in waves. He coughed blood most mornings. The medical officer said 3 months left, maybe less. Vogel seemed frustrated. 6 months had produced nothing. Time to try something different. They brought her in on a Tuesday morning, December 7th. Guards brought in a woman, hands bound, face bruised, but alive, alert, defiant. Simone Laurent, 32, resistance courier. Thaddeus had met her twice. Briefly, she carried messages between cells, new codes, new connections, knew everything the SD wanted. Vogel stood behind her, hands on her shoulders, almost gentle. "You recognize her?" Thaddeus said nothing. "Of course you do. Simone Laurent. Arrested 3 weeks ago. Very brave, very strong, but her strength is nearly exhausted." Vogel's voice stayed calm. "I'm going to torture her now, here, in front of you, and you're going to watch. And when she starts screaming, you'll have a choice. Tell me what I want to know, or listen to her suffer for your silence." Thaddeus looked at Simone. She shook her head fractionally. "Don't." The tools came out. Simone didn't scream at first, bit through her lip. Blood ran down her chin. Her eyes stayed locked on Thaddeus, telling him without words, "Hold, don't break." But then Vogel escalated, and Simone's control shattered, and the screaming started. High, inhuman, agony beyond endurance. Thaddeus lasted 11 minutes. "Stop, please, stop. I'll tell you what you want." Vogel called a halt immediately, helped Simone to a chair, gave her water, bandaged her wounds with surprising gentleness. "I'm listening." Thaddeus gave him safe houses, 3 of them, abandoned 2 months ago, a radio cache in a cemetery, empty for weeks, operational details for missions already completed, old intelligence, useless, but specific enough to sound real. Vogel listened, took notes. "Thank you, that will be investigated. Let her go." "I'm afraid I can't, but I promise she won't be tortured further. She'll be held, treated humanely. After the war, assuming Germany wins, she'll face trial. Assuming we lose, she'll be liberated. Either way, no more pain. You have my word." Vogel left. Guards took Simone away. She looked back once, and in her eyes, Thaddeus saw pity. That was the last time he saw her. 2 months later, February 1944, Thaddeus sat alone in isolation. They had moved him after he talked. Standard protocol: give cooperative prisoners time to reflect. To realize betrayal was a slippery slope. They were wrong. Thaddeus hadn't cooperated because he was broken. He'd given them nothing they could use, nothing that would cost lives, at least that's what he told himself. The jacket lay on the floor beside his cot. They'd finally returned it. A reward for cooperation. It still smelled like cordite and blood and 2 years of desperate resistance, and still carried the blade. Thaddeus touched the lapel, felt the slight stiffness where metal was sewn into fabric. 8 months since capture, the blade had stayed hidden through everything. But what good was it? He was handcuffed, the door locked, guards watching constantly. Even if he could access the weapon, what then? Kill a guard and die 30 seconds later? Voices in the hallway, German, casual conversation. 2 guards discussing weekend plans. One voice rose slightly. "Did you hear about the French woman, the one from cell 14? The courier?" "Yes. Executed last month. Firing squad. Vogel's orders." Thaddeus sat up, heart pounding. Thought Vogel promised no more torture. He kept that promise. Shot her clean, no suffering. When was this? January 17th, month ago tomorrow. The voices faded. Left Thaddeus sitting with information that rearranged everything. Simone Laurent was dead. Had been dead for a month. Had been dead when Vogel promised she'd be treated humanely. When Vogel gave his word. When Thaddeus broke. It had all been theater, manipulation. Vogel had probably killed her the same day. Had kept the secret to see if Thaddeus would give more. The Germans hadn't just taken his freedom, they'd taken his honor, his integrity, made him betray his principles for a lie. Thaddeus reached for the lapel, this time with different intent. Found the seam, felt for the end. The stitching was tight but designed to yield when needed. He worked at it carefully, slowly, learning how to access it when the moment came, because the moment would come somehow. Vogel would make a mistake, would give Thaddeus one chance, one opening. And when that moment arrived, Thaddeus knew exactly what he would do. Not escape. Escape was impossible, but he could do something else. Something that mattered more than survival. He could kill Heinrich Vogel, not for revenge, for balance, for justice, for the principle that evil should have a price, that even if Thaddeus died 10 seconds later, the world would be better with one less monster in it. The blade came loose, just slightly, just enough that he knew he could draw it when needed, could execute the motion Fairbairn had drilled into him. Draw, thrust, reset. He pushed it back into place, smoothed the lapel, lay back on his cot, waited. Outside, winter faded into spring. March arrived, the war continued, young men died in mud and snow and burning cities. The resistance fought on without him, but in a cell on Avenue Foch, an American agent with a broken body and a hidden blade prepared for one final act. One last decision, one moment where the weapon would determine whether he died as a victim or as a soldier. He didn't know when the opportunity would come, didn't know if it would come at all. But he was ready. And sometimes readiness was all you could control. April 3rd, 1944. 10 months since capture. Thaddeus woke to pale spring sunlight filtering through the barred window high above his cell. Outside, Paris was coming alive. Vendors opening shops, women buying bread, children walking to school. Life continuing as if occupation was normal, as if young men didn't rot in basements 3 floors below the street. His body had deteriorated beyond recovery. The medical officer had told Vogel 2 weeks ago that the prisoner had perhaps a month left. Infection, malnutrition, organ failure, the human machine breaking down from sustained abuse. Thaddeus could feel it. The weakness. The way standing required conscious effort. The way his vision grayed at the edges when he moved too quickly, but his mind remained sharp. Focused on a single objective, guards came at 8, breakfast, watery soup, stale bread. Thaddeus ate mechanically, forced the food down, knew he needed whatever strength it could provide. Today felt different. The quality of light. The sounds in the hallway. Some instinct honed by 2 years of living on the edge whispered that change was coming. At 9:30, boots in the corridor, multiple sets, heavy, purposeful, the kind of footsteps that meant someone important was moving. Thaddeus sat up on his cot, smoothed the jacket he'd slept in for 10 months, touched the lapel, felt the blade, ready. The door opened. Heinrich Vogel entered. Behind him, a single guard. Young. Thaddeus recognized him. Corporal Lucas Brenner, 22 years old, from Munich, had been rotated to Avenue Foch 3 months ago, fresh from the Eastern Front. Still had that hollow look soldiers got after sustained combat, after seeing things that couldn't be unseen. Brenner had shown Thaddeus a photograph 2 weeks prior, during a late-night guard shift when protocol relaxed slightly, a young woman holding an infant. "My wife," Brenner had said quietly. "My daughter, born in January. I haven't met her yet, just photos, letters, maybe after the war." Why he'd shared that, Thaddeus didn't know. Loneliness, maybe. The need to remind himself he was human, that somewhere beyond this building of suffering, normal life existed, love existed, hope existed. Now Brenner stood in the doorway, rifle slung across his back, face carefully neutral, following orders, playing his role in the machine. Vogel pulled a chair to the center of the cell. Saturday. Gestured for Thaddeus to remain on the cot. We need to talk. We've been talking for 10 months. Yes, and you've given me very little. Old intelligence. Abandoned safe houses, nothing current, nothing useful. Vogel crossed his legs, relaxed, conversational. But I think you know more. I think there's information locked in that stubborn American head. And I think you're going to give it to me today. Why today? Because today I received authorization to use enhanced methods. Things we've avoided so far. Medical torture, carefully calibrated, designed to cause maximum pain with minimum lethality. You could survive it for weeks.
Months, perhaps, screaming every day, begging for death until finally your body or your mind breaks completely. Vogel leaned forward. Or you could simply tell me what I want to know, spare yourself that suffering, end this cleanly. Thaddeus said nothing, studied Vogel's face, saw no deception there. The man meant it, believed it, thought he was offering mercy. I need names, Vogel continued. Current safe houses, radio frequencies, whatever you know that's still relevant.
Give me that, and I'll arrange a transfer. Labor camp instead of execution. Hard work, yes, but you'll survive. When the war ends, you'll go home. See America again. Isn't that worth cooperation? The war will end with Germany losing. Perhaps, perhaps not. But either way, you won't see it from this cell. You'll die here. Soon. Painfully. For nothing. Because the information you're protecting, it's already compromised. The networks are broken. The resistance is scattered. Your silence doesn't protect anyone. It just prolongs your suffering. Thaddeus looked at Brenner. The young corporal stood near the door, eyes forward, not meeting anyone's gaze, just another soldier following orders, just another piece in the machine. I need to think, Thaddeus said. Vogel smiled. Of course, I'll give you 10 minutes. Corporal Brenner will stay with you. Ensure you don't do anything foolish. When I return, I'll need your answer. He stood, straightened his uniform, walked to the door, paused. Choose wisely, my friend. This is your last chance for mercy. The door closed, locked. Left Thaddeus alone with Brenner and the decision that wasn't really a decision at all. Silence filled the cell. Outside, a bird sang. Somewhere in the building, footsteps echoed, the sounds of occupation, of war continuing, regardless of individual choice. Brenner shifted his weight. Uncomfortable, being alone with a prisoner violated protocol. But Vogel was his superior officer. Orders were orders. Thaddeus watched him. This young man, this father who'd never met his daughter, this soldier who'd survived the Eastern Front only to end up guarding dying spies in a Paris basement. Was he guilty? Was anyone in this building innocent? Where did you draw the line between following orders and choosing evil? The photograph flashed in memory. The woman. The infant. Brenner had shown it with such tenderness, such longing, had talked about going home, about teaching his daughter to ride a bicycle, about growing old in peace. Did that man deserve to die? Thaddeus's hand moved to his collar. Casual, natural, adjusting the fabric. Brenner didn't react, didn't see it as a threat. Why would he? The prisoner had been searched 3 times, had been in custody 10 months. If he had a weapon, they would have found it by now. The seam yielded under pressure. Constance Wilmot's stitching released exactly as designed. The steel settled into Thaddeus's palm, sharp enough to part flesh with a touch. All he had to do was stand, close the distance, one thrust. Brenner would go down. Thaddeus could take the rifle, could shoot his way out of the cell, would die 30 seconds later when guards responded to the gunfire. But he'd die fighting. Die as a soldier. That's what Fairbairn had promised. One final act of defiance. But Fairbairn had never specified what that act had to be. Thaddeus held the weapon low, out of sight, studied it. This tiny blade that had survived 3 searches, that had waited 10 months for this moment, that represented everything SOE believed about never surrendering, never accepting helplessness. He thought about Patrick Murphy, the man who'd bled out on that factory floor 19 years ago. Thought about how young Murphy had been, 24, newly married. How his wife had come to the funeral 7 months pregnant. How she'd looked at Thaddeus with eyes that asked why. Brenner was 22, had a wife, had a daughter, was guilty of nothing except being born German in 1922, except being conscripted, except following orders in a war he probably didn't start and couldn't stop. Was he guilty enough to die? Footsteps in the hallway. Vogel returning. 10 minutes elapsed. Time for answers. Time for consequences. The door opened. Vogel entered. Saw Thaddeus, sitting calmly on the cot. Saw Brenner standing at attention. Saw nothing wrong, nothing threatening. Just a broken prisoner and a young guard and another day in occupied Paris. "Have you decided?" Vogel asked. Thaddeus stood, slowly, carefully, the blade concealed against his palm, hidden by his body. "Yes." "And?" "I have information about current operations, but it's complicated, technical. I need to show you on a map." Vogel's eyes narrowed, suspicious, but also intrigued. 10 months of interrogation coming to fruition, finally. "Brenner, get the maps from my office. The detailed Paris city plans." Brenner hesitated. "Sir, protocol says I shouldn't leave you alone with... I've been interrogating prisoners since before you were born, Corporal. I think I can handle one half-dead American. Get the maps, now." "Yes, sir." Brenner moved to the door, unlocked it, stepped into the hallway. The door swung shut behind him. The lock engaged from outside, leaving Thaddeus alone with Heinrich Vogel, the man who'd tortured him for 10 months, who'd lied about Simone Laurent, who'd broken fingers and pulled nails and drowned him in bathtubs, who represented everything wrong with this war, this occupation, this machinery of suffering. "Show me," Vogel said. What information do you have?" Thaddeus crossed the cell. 3 steps. Vogel stood near the chair, relaxed, confident. Not threatened by a prisoner who could barely walk, who weighed maybe 120 pounds, who looked like a strong wind would knock him over. "It's about the rail network," Thaddeus said. "The sabotage points we identified. There's a pattern. You need to see it to understand." He reached into his jacket. As if retrieving papers, Vogel watched, still not alarmed, still thinking this was cooperation, capitulation, victory. The blade came out fast, Fairbairn's training taking over, muscle memory from 100 repetitions, draw, thrust. The steel drove into Vogel's throat just below the Adam's apple, angled upward, seeking the carotid artery the way training had specified. Vogel's eyes went wide, hands came up, grabbed at Thaddeus, but shock was already setting in. Blood pressure dropped, consciousness faded, not in 5 seconds, not like the charts promised, but in 8, 9, 10. Vogel sank to his knees, still grasping, still trying to fight, but the body was shutting down, prioritizing brain, heart, lungs, everything else secondary. Thaddeus held firm, watched, felt nothing, no triumph, no satisfaction, just grim acknowledgement that one monster fewer walked the earth. Vogel collapsed, face down, blood spreading across the concrete floor, draining toward the center, toward the drain they'd installed for exactly this purpose, for easy cleanup after interrogations. The irony wasn't lost on Thaddeus. Shouts in the hallway. Brenner had heard something, was returning. Thaddeus moved fast, grabbed Vogel's pistol from his holster. Luger, 8 rounds, more than enough. The door burst open. Brenner, eyes taking in the scene. Vogel dead. Thaddeus armed, everything going wrong simultaneously. "Don't," Thaddeus said, pistol aimed, steady, despite the trembling in his arms. "Don't reach for that rifle." Brenner froze, hands visible. "You killed him." "Yes. They'll execute you for this." "I was already dying." "This just makes it faster." More shouts. Running feet. The building mobilizing. Alarms would sound any second. Soldiers would flood this floor. Thaddeus had maybe 30 seconds before overwhelming force arrived. He could shoot Brenner now, clear the doorway, make a run for it, die fighting. But Brenner wasn't reaching for his weapon, wasn't calling for help, just stood there, looking at Vogel's body, looking at Thaddeus, understanding flooding his young face. "You had that knife the whole time," Brenner said, quietly. 10 months. You could have killed any of us, any time. Yes, but you chose him. Why? Because he was guilty. You're just following orders. There's a difference. Brenner's hand moved toward his rifle, slowly. Thaddeus tensed, finger on trigger, ready, but Brenner didn't draw. Instead, he stepped aside, cleared the doorway. "Window at the end of the hall, 2nd floor. You won't survive, but you'll die outside, not in this cell." "Why?" "Because my daughter will grow up in whatever world we make, and I want it to be one where mercy matters, where men can decide who deserves death and who deserves life." Brenner's eyes were wet. "Go, before I change my mind." Thaddeus ran, or tried to. His body protested every step, legs weak from months of malnutrition, lungs burning, shoulder screaming where old injuries had never healed properly. But he pushed through, down the hallway, past empty cells, past interrogation rooms, past all the apparatus of suffering the SD had built. Brenner's shout came from behind. "Prisoner escaping! 2nd floor. He's armed." Giving warning, giving other guards time to respond, following protocol even while breaking it, the contradictions of war, of being human in inhuman times. The window appeared at the corridor's end, tall, barred, but the bars were decorative, wrought iron, not designed to hold prisoners, just to look elegant. Pre-war architecture meeting wartime necessity. Thaddeus fired twice. Glass exploded outward, shards catching spring sunlight. Crystalline rain falling to the street below. He fired again. The wrought iron bent, twisted, created an opening barely large enough for an emaciated body. Behind him, boots pounded closer, voices shouting in German, orders being given, the machine responding, closing in, 10 feet away, 8, 6. Thaddeus went through the window, felt glass tear his jacket. The jacket Constance Wilmot had sewn with such care, that had carried him through 2 years of resistance. That had hidden the blade for 10 months. That was finally giving up its secrets as fabric ripped and seams split. The drop was 15 feet. 2nd floor. The courtyard rushed up to meet him. "This is going to hurt." Impact. His left ankle shattered on contact with cobblestones. The snap was audible even over the shouts above. Left arm took the rest, radius and ulnar both breaking clean. The pain was white-hot, immediate, overwhelming, but beneath the agony, something else, relief. He was outside, under open sky, breathing free air for the first time in 10 months. 20 feet to the street, to civilian traffic, to witnesses who would see what happened here. Who would remember? Thaddeus crawled, pulled himself forward with his right arm, dragged useless legs behind. Every inch was victory. Every foot was defiance. 15 feet. The cobblestones were warm from morning sun. He could smell bread baking somewhere. could hear a woman singing. Life, normal, beautiful. Continuing, 10 feet, windows opened above, rifles appeared, professional soldiers taking aim at an escaping prisoner, following training, following orders, doing their jobs. Stop, or we shoot. 8 feet. He could see people now. Parisians on the sidewalk, stopping, staring, witnessing. 6 feet. The first shot missed, cracked against stone, 6 inches from his head. The second didn't. Caught him in the back. Right side, the impact drove him flat, breath exploded from his lungs. His vision grayed. 4 feet, just 4 more feet to the street, to freedom, to mattering. He pushed, pulled, clawed forward, right arm, 1 more time, 3 feet. The third shot hit his shoulder, the fourth his leg. But sensation was fading now, shock taking over, merciful, kind, the body's last gift to the dying. 2 feet. He could see a child watching from across the street, maybe 7 years old, holding his mother's hand, eyes wide. This boy would remember. Would tell his children someday about the man who crawled from Avenue Foch, who refused to die quietly. 1 foot. 1 more, just 1 more. Thaddeus reached forward, fingers stretching. Almost there. Almost. The 5th shot ended it. Center mass, instant. Final, he collapsed. Face against warm stone. Paris smelled like spring, like bread and coffee and morning sun, like hope. His last thought was of Constance Wilmot, of her prayer, that he'd never have to use the blade, that he'd come home safe, that when the war ended, he could burn the jacket and forget. He'd used the blade, he wouldn't come home. But he'd made the right choice, had killed guilt and spared innocence, had died as a soldier, not a victim. Maybe that was enough. Thaddeus Blackwell closed his eyes and let go. The war continued without him. Brenner survived, went home to Munich in 1945, met his daughter for the first time. She was 3 years old by then, didn't recognize him, cried when he tried to hold her. But over time, they built something, a relationship, a life, peace. In 1947, Allied investigators came asking questions about Avenue Foch, about prisoners, about how they'd been treated. Brenner told the truth about Vogel's methods, about the torture, about the American who'd killed his commanding officer and chosen to spare a young guard's life. "Why did he spare you?" the investigator asked. "Because I showed him my daughter's photograph," Brenner said. "Because mercy is still possible, even in war, even in hell. Some men refuse to become monsters." The blade was recovered from Vogel's throat, catalogued as evidence, eventually sent to Allied intelligence for analysis. Someone recognized it, the distinctive design, the lightweight construction, the size. Fairbairn heard about it in 1948. By then, he'd retired from SOE, lived in a cottage in Scotland, tried to forget how many young men he'd trained, how many weapons he'd designed. He gave one interview to a military historian. When asked about the lapel knife, he paused for a long time before answering. "Did it work? No agents escaped using it, not one. As far as I know, it was used exactly once by an American named Thaddeus Blackwell. He killed his interrogator, then died trying to escape. Then it failed." "No," Fairbairn said quietly. "It succeeded perfectly, not because it saved his life, but because it gave him agency, the ability to decide who deserved death, who deserved mercy, what kind of man he'd be in his final moments." Fairbairn died in 1960, never wavered from that position. The knife went to a museum eventually, cleaned, restored, displayed in a case with other SOE equipment. A small plaque told part of the story until 2018, 74 years later. An elderly man walked into the museum, 86 years old, moving slowly but still sharp, still present. "My name is Jakob Brenner," he said. I'm the grandson of Lucas Brenner, German soldier, served at Avenue Foch. My grandfather told me a story before he died about an American spy who spared his life. Who could have killed him but chose not to? The curator listened, recorded the story. Jakob donated his grandfather's diary, pages describing that day, the escape, the decision, the aftermath. My grandfather lived because of Thaddeus Blackwell's mercy, Jacob said, which means my father lived, which means I lived, which means my children and grandchildren live, all because one man made a choice, chose who deserved death and who deserved life, chose to be human when the world was inhuman. The museum updated the plaque, added the names, added the story. The knife rests in its case now, under glass, under lights, a silent witness to one man's final decision. One moment where a tiny blade changed everything. Not because it saved a life, because it defined one.